Have you ever read a book that opens with several storylines, but each one feels a little bit disconnected and almost random? Like you're introduced to these characters and you're beginning to follow their stories, but they don't seem to mesh or relate at all. And you wonder, like, what does this person have to do with this person? And then you're maybe close to halfway through the book, and all of a sudden you get to that chapter where everything comes together. The storylines converge. The purpose becomes clear, and you recognize, every delay, every decision, every detail, it was all leading us to this one moment. And there's probably some of you that when you get to that one moment, it's so significant that it almost makes you want to go back and start from the beginning and reread so you can finally okay, I know what's about to happen. Now let's see how it all fits together. I really, really hope that we get a little taste of that experience this morning in the text. And because I think that's coming, we're going to do just a little bit of work in going backwards, and we're going to highlight a few things in the ministry of Jesus as he has been to many different places, ministering to many different people, and in many different ways. And my prayer is that as we look back at his ministry, then today what we see is where that begins to converge in our hearts and minds, and we see, his message and his mission. Okay. I'm getting it. Because if we see it clearly, I believe it has the power to change everything. So we're going to start with the closing verses of Mark chapter number 4. Now, I'm just going to put up behind me the verses that I'm highlighting, just so you know, but we're not going to reread anything because we're going to jump into some new text, but I'm just going to skip through a couple. In the closing verses of Mark 4, Jesus tells his disciples they're going to sail across a lake. A huge storm comes up and Jesus stills the storm. As Mark chapter 5 opens, their boat lands in this region of the Gerasenes where a man with a legion of impure spirits meets Jesus. Jesus casts out the demons and into a herd of pigs, which infuriates the townspeople, and they beg Jesus to leave. And yet the man who was once demon possessed begs to go with Jesus. But Jesus sends him away and says this in verse 19, "No, go home to your own people. Tell them." This becomes very important in today's storyline. What does Jesus mean by your people? And here's what we have to grasp. This man was an unclean Gentile. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the word Gentile, it means anyone who's not a Jew. There's a very small number of Jews. Everyone else is a Gentile. They don't follow the Torah, so they're Gentiles. This Gentile man is sent by Jesus to the region of the Decapolis, and he begins telling people what Jesus has done for him, while Jesus and his disciples, they return to their side. And we know it's their side because immediately they're met with a man who works in a synagogue. A synagogue is Jewish. And met by an unclean woman who reaches out and touches Jesus's garment and she's healed. She's only considered unclean because she's in the land of Israel. Nowhere else would she have been considered unclean. Jesus returns in chapter 6 to his hometown of Nazareth. And while many people have been amazed at his miracles and at his message, his own people reject him. But he then sends out his 12 disciples 2 by 2 and says, "Go to the Jewish towns and villages and tell them the good news." Much later in Mark 6, after the hearing of the death of John the Baptist, his 12 disciples return to him, and they're so excited about everything that they've been able to do. But Jesus notices they're weary and they're hungry. And so he says, "Come with me to a restful place, a solitary place. We're going to go aside." And yet these men, these 12, have been so effective in their ministry that large crowds followed them even into this solitary place. And when Jesus sees the large crowd, he's moved with compassion and says, these people are like sheep without a shepherd. And so he teaches them, and then he begins to feed them. 5,000 with 2 loaves. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. 2 fish. Feeds 5,000 fishies, right? Little fishies. And they pick up 12 baskets. Now, we've already talked about this miracle, but I want to take you back for just a moment to the numbers and what they mean to the Jewish authors who are writing our Bibles. 1 always represented God. 2 meant the tablets of Moses. 3 was community. This is not the Trinity yet. It'll become the Trinity for us, but back then it was the fathers of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the community. 4 were the Gentiles because it was the 4 corners of the earth. 5 was the Torah, the law of God, the books of Moses. 6 was incompletion because 7 is completion. 6 was also man. 7 was not just completion, but it was also the number of the nations. This is important to today's text. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. It comes from Joshua chapter 3, verse number 10, where Joshua is receiving instructions from Yahweh that when you go in, he would drive out the nations. And there's 7 of them listed. Now, there's multiple times where these are listed, and they're not always with 7. And so they come back to this completion of the nations. And so the number 7 sometimes represented the nations of the world. We have the 10 commandments, the 12 tribes of Israel. 40 is often used for testing, and then 1,000 is fullness. Like he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. And so what we saw in that very first miracle is that like the numbers were all Israel related. 2 tablets, 5, 2 fishies, 5 loaves of bread, feeding 5,000, the full number of Torah people, and enough leftovers for all 12, meaning all of those who are in the covenant family of God. Just keep that in mind as we work our way through. We're going to keep going through Mark 6. And after Jesus feeds the 5,000, he sends his disciples on a boat. He walks on the water to where they are, and he passes by and speaks the divine name. And we talked about that a few weeks ago, really echoing what Moses experienced on Mount Sinai. And he's revealing himself to be this new and greater Moses, one who feeds the multitudes with the bread of heaven and reveals the glory of God himself. Okay, that's where we're caught up to that point. Now we're going to begin reading at the end of chapter number 6. Look at verse number 53, if you would. Mark chapter 6, verse number 53. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. Now, where are they at? Gennesaret. They've been here one other time to interact with one man who was once possessed by a legion of demons that was sent out on mission by Jesus, just like he had sent out the 12. And it's clear he took that mission seriously because the people who once told Jesus to leave are now excited to see him. They recognize him, and look at what they do. Verse number 55. They ran throughout that whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countrysides, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. Okay, whoa. Hey, this sounds like everything that was happening in the Jewish towns and villages is now happening in the Gentile, the non-Jewish places. People who are sick are being brought to him. People are touching the edge of his garment and being healed. Okay. Now we're going to skip over chapter 7 because, Eric preached the first half of it last week, and thank you, Eric. It was an excellent message reminding us that it's more important that we focus on our dirty hearts than our dirty hands. Because as we saw last week, the Pharisees from Jerusalem came to Jesus, but we have to recognize where they came to him. They came to him in a Gentile land where these people weren't followers of Torah. They weren't going to be doing these ceremonial washings. And Jesus was exposing to the Pharisees, you wash your hands, but your hearts aren't very clean. Jim's going to share with us the rest of chapter 7 in a couple of weeks. And as he does, keep in mind, it's all happening in Gentile territory. Now we're going to go to chapter 8. Would you join me in chapter 8? Mark chapter number 8. It says this, during those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance. Verse 4, his disciples answered, but where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people, and they did so. Verse 7, they had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 were present. After he sent them away, he got into the boat with his disciples and went into the region of Dalmanutha. Now, this, if we're a casual reader, we might go like, oh, I've already read this. Jesus already fed the multitudes with a few bread and fish. But we have to be understanding this is not a repeat. This is something new. And then that begs us to ask this question, well, what do we do with this passage? I mean, if Jesus performs basically the same miracle in the same way, what new truth are we supposed to learn? Why would it be in here twice? And I believe the answer is going to come in the way that we approach the text. If we approach the text like a normal Western pastor, preacher, theologian, Christian, what we're going to do is we're going to look in there and we're going to say, all right, so what is a good practical lesson that I could pull out and apply to my life? And I think that's really important. I think it's really good to do that. Nothing wrong with it at all. But I think it's incomplete. Because we have to keep this in mind as we read the scriptures. The Bible was not written to us. It was written for us. This book, the one you hold in your hand, was written by Jewish authors to specific audiences in the New Testament somewhere around 2,000 years ago for an express purpose to reveal God to his people. So as we read this miracle, we have to ask ourselves, what new thing about Jesus does this repetitive miracle teach us about himself, about the character and the ways of God? And that's important because we have to keep in mind, everything happening in Jesus' ministry is preparation for these 12 apostles who are following him. They are with him 24/7. He is pouring his life into them because he knows I've got to prepare them for my departure and then for their mission. So we have to keep that in mind as we read this passage. Yes, we're reading their testimony, but the question we should not ask first is, well, what do I get out of this? No, that's not the first question we ask. The first question we ask is, what is Jesus teaching his 12 apostles about himself and about the character and the ways of God? Well, let's just look at what is the same and what is not in these 2 miracles. So here's what's the same and what is not. In both, a large crowd gathers in a remote place. In the first, it was 5,000 Jews who followed Jesus after hearing the message of the apostles. In the second, it was 4,000 Gentiles who followed Jesus after hearing a message that originated with a once demon-possessed man. Jesus has compassion. But in the first miracle, he has compassion on Jews, and he says they're like sheep without a shepherd, and that should not surprise us. The Jews are called the flock of God. He's already called their religious leaders bad shepherds. But when Jesus has compassion on the 4,000 Gentiles, he doesn't mention sheep or shepherds. In both cases, the disciples have minimal resources. They have 5 loaves and 2 little fishies. The second time, they have 7 loaves. And how many fish? I guess the Holy Spirit didn't know how many, right? They couldn't. No, that has nothing to do with it. How many fish there were didn't fit into the purpose of the story. We see number 4 that Jesus blesses, multiplies, and satisfies. Right? So Jesus, he does the same thing. This miracle works the same exact way. And it ends with Jesus providing an abundance. There are baskets of leftovers that are collected. There's 12 baskets the first time, 7 baskets the second time. The number of people is shared. There's 5,000 plus men and women and children, 5,000 men plus women and children. The second time there's 4,000 plus women and children. And now notice the patterns in the numbers. The yellow behind me is the first feeding of the 5,000, where we have the tablets of Moses, the Torah people, the tribes of Israel, all Jewish numbers. In the second reading, it's 7 loaves, don't know how many fish, 4,000 people, and 7 baskets are collected. And now I know, you could be sitting there thinking like, Brian, like the Bible code, there. No. We don't need a Bible code. And I'm gonna convince. There's not a hidden meaning. It's not a hidden meaning. I'm gonna tell you, it's not a hidden meaning. This is not about a Bible code. We have to go back to asking ourselves, what is Jesus trying to reveal about himself and the character and the ways of God? And I just have to ask, could the whole purpose of this second feeding of the multitudes be a far greater lesson than that Jesus can do the same thing twice? Rather, could it be that Jesus was revealing that not only is he the sufficient bread of life for the Jews, but he is also the sufficient bread of life for the Gentiles? And before you just dismiss that, it's like you're playing with the numbers, like remember how the ministry of Jesus is converging. What had happened in the land of Israel is now happening in the land of the Gentiles. Miraculous healings, sent ones, large crowds gathering, multiplication of bread and fish, all pointing to the reality that Jesus has brought a kingdom to which he is inviting all people. I didn't come to bring a kingdom to Israel. I came to bring the kingdom of God to all people. See, the disciples, they were Jews who were expectantly awaiting a Messiah to restore the kingdom of Israel. The Gentiles had no such thought in their mind. They weren't looking for anything of the sort. And yet both groups are being drawn to Jesus in the same ways, appearing as if Jesus was trying to say, yes, I am enough for the Jew, and I am also enough for the outsider. And again, I know you might be still sitting there a little skeptical, thinking, you're just using those numbers to fit into your message. And I understand that, so let's keep reading the text and see if there's any more clarity. Look at verse number 11, Mark chapter 8, verse 11. It says, the Pharisees came and began to question Jesus to test him. They asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it. And he pauses. Jesus, the Pharisees come to Jesus and want a sign. He's like, how many signs do you need? But he knows their hearts are hard. They do not see him for who he is. Keep reading verse 13. Then he left them, meaning the Pharisees, got back into the boat and crossed to the other side. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread except for 1 loaf that they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. So let's pause and let's put this in order. Jesus had just been confronted by the Pharisees, and now he warns his disciples of the yeast or the leaven, your scripture may say, of the Pharisees. And here's what we have to remember. A little bit of yeast will change the whole loaf. He's saying a little bit of thinking, a little bit of the wrong type of thinking can change your whole heart and change your whole outlook on life. So beware. Well, and what were the Pharisees doing? Well, they were expecting God to fit into this nice, clean, neat box that if I do this, God will accept me. It was the religious works. And what was Herod doing? Well, if you remember Herod, he had John the Baptist beheaded after having his daughter dance in front of him and a whole bunch of other people, a very immoral man. And yet Herod was expecting God to accept him because he was a man of power and wealth. I can demand, I can buy anything I want. People do what I want, including God. And Jesus is warning his disciples, there's two ways to corruption: holding tightly to one's religious works or fully rejecting God's instructions. I think we have the same type of thinking today. We have those in churches who think I'm better than those. And then we have other who would call themselves Christians to say, I don't need the church, just Jesus and me. And I will tell you, both of that thinking is corrupt. Both of those thinkings will ruin your entire heart and outlook on life. But when Jesus said this to the disciples, they missed the point. But we have to forget, we're about to read what the disciples thought he was talking about. Before we do, remember this. It's likely every one of those disciples, except for Peter, was under the age of 20 when they were chosen to follow Jesus. So we're talking about some young college-age students, not middle-aged theologians. Keep that in mind. And here's what they say in verse 16, after Jesus warned them. It says, they discussed with one another and said, it is because we have no bread. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? Remember what? Look at verse 19. When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12. They replied. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? They answered, 7. He said to them, do you still not understand? You still don't get it. 5 loaves for 5,000, and how many baskets? 12. 7 loaves for 4,000, how many baskets? 7. Don't you get it? It's like you were there, but don't you see? Don't you remember? And not only does this to me confirm the importance of the numbers in the stories, but it shows that both miracles were pointing to a greater reality, that Jesus is more than enough for all people. But the disciples, these young men, were still missing it, and Jesus knows it, so he's going to take this truth and he's going to jam it even harder, because look at the next thing he does, verse 22. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus said, do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking around. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, don't even go into the village. Now, this is one of those miracles that many people struggle to understand. Why would Jesus do an incomplete miracle? But if we understand this miracle in the context, It makes complete sense. Jesus leads this blind man outside of the city. So this is not about his fame. It is not about people recognizing the work he is doing. He leads this man outside of the city. It's just Jesus, this man, and his disciples. This is a teaching lesson. And he heals the man. And the man says, oh, I could see men, but they look like trees. I can see, but I can't see for what it really is. And Jesus touches him again, and he sees clearly, and then he sends the man home because the man was just simply there to teach the disciples a lesson. And the lesson was, hey, 12, this guy is you. You think you see clearly, but you're missing it. And here's how we know that, because the story is about to go on, and Jesus is going to ask his disciples, who am He wants them to have clear perception of who he is. And so he's done miracles for the Jews. Now he's bringing it to the Gentiles and he's saying, who am I? And they're like, oh man, what do we do with this bread? No, it's not about the bread. I'm the bread. Who am I? Whoa. Come here. Come here. Let me show you. Here, can you see now you're blind? Can you see now I can kind of see? That's you. This is you. And the second touch, he can see clearly. And Jesus is wanting them to be prepared for that next question, which is, who am I to you? I know who other men say that I am, but who am I to you? And I think so often we see, but we don't see clearly. We understand, but we don't understand fully. We get the picture, but we often miss the point. Like how many people walk in and out of a building Sunday morning after Sunday morning and still miss the point? The point like this, that the beauty and value of our faith family, they're not found in what we consume, but in what we contribute. Trusting Jesus, who is more than enough for all, to fill anything that we empty. If we leave the gathering of a faith family every week going, man, I'm so full, you've missed the point. Because we're here to pour out for one another. But if you leave every Sunday going like, I'm exhausted, church tires me out, you've missed the point. Because Jesus is here to fill you. If you stand out there as the worship team sings and you go, man, I don't really like these songs. Or if you go, man, this is my favorite song, you've missed the point. Because your focus is on what song we're singing, not who we are singing to. If we ever have this thought, man, I think our church should do more of, if you have ever thought that, you've missed the point. And you know why I say that? Because you are the church. I'm not the church. You are. And if you think, I think our church should be reaching this group of people, guess what? Go reach those people. Don't wait for the organization to take place coming from the pulpit. Go reach the people that you think need to be reached. Because we miss the point. The beauty and the value of a faith family is not that we are all toy soldiers walking in line following one person. No, we are all living stones. And we do come together. And if you say, well, then I don't need the church, you've missed the point. Like you're not a body, you're a body part. You need the church. Church needs the head who is Jesus. We need one another. But man, don't miss the beauty of what happens when we gather like this weekly and throughout the week. So maybe you consider this week asking the Spirit to allow you to have an interaction where you have to empty yourself, trusting He will fill you. It may be financially, it may be emotionally or spiritually, I don't know. But maybe ask the Spirit to give you an interaction this week where you have to pour yourself out, but to say, I trust that you will fill me back up. We miss the point of this sometimes, the love of Jesus. And that it's not confined to people who think or live like us. It's poured out to all. Because our Jesus, who is more than enough for all people, fills us to love as he loves. Hey, let's just bring it down to reality. You ever find yourself seething with anger at the people on the other side of the political aisle? I think you've missed the heart of Jesus then. You roll your eyes at people who are living opposite to what the biblical truth says. You might be missing the point of the heart of Jesus. Do you avoid people who make you uncomfortable? Listen, Jesus didn't love us because we were lovable. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us, right? Romans 5 says that we were his enemies. So let me ask you, where would you be if Jesus treated you like you treat those who live in opposition to you? What if we walked towards those to whom the world walks away from? What if we were people who prayed for those who offended us? We actually ate with those who might confuse us with their actions, and we were to love those who are farthest from grace? Like, isn't that where the light of the love of Christ would shine brightest? Maybe this week we plan an intentional conversation with someone who we disagree with. And our whole point is, I'm just going to ask a question, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to love without an agenda. Maybe that's a little more of what the love of Christ looks like. And last, I think sometimes we miss that the revelation of Jesus seeks to do more than inform, but to transform. As Jesus, who is enough for all people, fills our hearts with faith instead of fear. Can I just get you all to ask this or answer this question in your heart in just a moment? I'm going to ask you to raise your hand physically or raise your hand. Do you believe that Jesus actually multiplied bread and fish in this miracle that we read? Would you raise a hand? You actually believe he did that? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Put your hands down. So then may I follow it up? And then why are we worried about tomorrow? Wait, he saw people were hungry? He had compassion on them, and he took a few loaves and a few fish, and he literally broke them and provided for them. He did that. And yet we live as if Jesus can't see our problems, or if he does, he's ignorant to them. Or that if he does see our problems, he doesn't have the capability to step in and actually do something about it. I mean, like what? And I mean this with all the kindness in the world. What good is it to believe that Jesus is enough for others, but to live as if he's not enough for us? Like if we really believe that Jesus sees us and he can supply, and not just supply, but satisfy, he can give us leftovers. Like if we believe that, then it's time to live confident of his care. Bring your fears to him. Trust him to provide, even when you don't know how it's going to happen. Live with open hands. And here's the thing, because he is going to use his people to be the answer to the prayers of his people. Someone needed to bring the 7 loaves to Jesus so he could multiply it. Someone in this room, Jesus might be asking you to be the answer to a prayer someone else in this room is praying. He'll take what you give and he will multiply it, but he needs you to step out and give. So maybe this week, we just write down one area that we're carrying worry. And every time that worry raises its ugly head, we confront that worry by saying, I am going to thank Jesus for the way that he has provided for me in the past, all the blessings that I could think of. And suddenly this little worry right here, it just fades away because it doesn't have power when we confront it with the truth of who Jesus is and what Jesus has done for us. And that leads us to coming to the communion table this morning. I want us to see the bread and the cup for the illustration that they truly are. Here's the illustration this bread and cup really are, that Jesus is more than enough for you, for everyone. He is enough for forgiveness. He is enough for a right standing with God. He is enough for eternal life. He is enough for every need of every person in this room, no matter how you lived last week. He is enough. Because he's the God of the insider and the God of the outsider, and he has a place for both in his kingdom. As we read this morning, Jesus fed the multitudes. The people sat down on the ground. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a moment. You are sitting on the ground, watching Jesus. I don't know if he's down on the side of the mountain where he's standing, but he is taking that bread and he is tearing it and he is putting it into the baskets that the disciples are taking out into the people. Picture Jesus standing there breaking bread as you sit on that hillside. He's doing what only he can do. And now with your eyes still closed, I want to take you to a different hillside. Jesus is no longer breaking bread. His body is being broken. And I would love for you to look directly into the eyes of Jesus as he is on that cross. They're going to be bloodied eyes. His appearance will not look like a man. He has been beaten and broken. And I want you to look into his eyes, and I want you to see his lips whisper to you, because he doesn't have much strength, but I want you to see his lips whisper to you, I am enough for you. For everything in your life. I am enough for you. And as you're hearing those words, would you just continue to look at Jesus, but examine your heart? Like, where have we seen Jesus as necessary, but not as sufficient? Where in your life have you trusted him for salvation, but not for satisfaction? Where have you believed in his power, but you have doubted his provision? I want you to take that. I want you to say, Jesus, this is where I have been. I have not been trusting you. And I want you to look back into his eyes, and I want you to whisper back to him, Jesus, I believe you are enough. I believe you are enough. Enough from my worry, enough from my fear, enough from my insecurity. Jesus, we sang to you earlier, teach us to abide, because we know, we really want to trust you. We really do, but we're going to fail. Lord, as we come as a faith family in just a few moments to take some bread and some juice to be reminded of what communion looks like. Lord, I pray that as we take it, we are reminded that you are enough.